Thank you all for joining us at this November 14th council work session. Everybody is abuzz, so either there's something more interesting going on out there than there is here, or maybe we should switch roles, I don't know. So thank you all for joining us, and first item of business is a work session on the Northwest Natural Gas franchise.
Good, thank you. Good afternoon, I'm Twyla Miller, I'm the Finance Director for the city. And as you know, our franchise with Northwest Natural will be expiring a 20-year term in November of 2019. This work session was originally planned to bring back information on right-of-way franchises and our plan to move between now and renewal and next fall. But in mid-October, there was a work session poll that was approved that had specific questions related to the franchise and also some CRO efforts. Since then, we've modified this work session to include information on the Climate Action Plan, or CAP, as there is an overlap between the two topics. Ethan Nelson and I are here today to provide a brief overview of both processes and receive feedback from council on components to be considered moving forward. This will provide input on information that we'll bring back to you at a later date in the winter. So the right-of-way franchise agreements are negotiated between the city and Northwest Natural Gas. The agreement governs the use of the right-of-way to ensure safety, coordinated access, stability of infrastructure, and compensation for public use of right-of-way. For the current franchise, there are many components. We have a 20-year franchise term with the opportunity to reopen every 5 years. There's other language in the franchise related to audits, facility relocation, and abandonment provisions. And the franchise fee has been set at 5% of gross revenues for this past term, which equates to about $1.4 million annually in general fund revenue. When we look at other Oregon cities, franchise fees are generally set between 3% and 5%. And staff have conducted some preliminary research to see if there are franchises that currently address climate issues, such as been suggested in the work session poll from October. We have not found any jurisdictions that have put restrictions on utility companies related to GHG or climate recovery goals. So this slide shows our general process for franchise negotiations. Staff generally begin research between now and the winter months. We do some outreach to the League of Oregon Cities, other Oregon jurisdictions, and look at jurisdictions around the country. We also reach out to our public works staff to see if there are any right-of-way management issues that we need to address during franchise negotiations. Generally, we develop policy considerations to shape the negotiations, which occur in the spring or summer months, and then we come back to council with public hearings and an ordinance in the fall. A team from finance and the city manager's office will be working through this negotiation process in the spring and summer. As I previously mentioned, with the introduction of additional work session questions to evaluate CRO-related information in this process and the overlap with the franchise renewal process, there is the overlap between these two areas. Ethan is going to walk you through the CAP process as we look to the winter and spring months. I'll turn it over to Ethan.
Thanks, Twyla. Ethan Nelson, I'm the city's intergovernmental relations manager and also have sustainability within my purview of duties. And I kind of want to make sure that we have a sense that what we're trying to do here is that there's a kind of a franchise renewal discussion and then a climate action plan discussion, and there's actually kind of overlap at times. And so we're really trying to make sure that council has a good understanding of what it is that we're seeing and making sure that then we can kind of set the table for discussions and be able to kind of get direction from there. And so what I'm going to try to do is provide that second part. Twyla gave the franchise fee. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about where we are with the CAP and also provide some context in regards to recent information that we've just gotten back from analysis that we've been doing through the climate action planning process that gives you some idea of where this fits within our climate action goals and strategies. Thanks. So as you've seen this one before, and you'll probably see a lot of the similar graphics because we hope to kind of utilize them for continuing to build awareness. We've been on a journey for quite a number of years working on our climate action plans, and we've done quite a lot over the years, and we've implemented a lot of different strategies and investments and new programs. And what we're in the process of is kind of updating our climate action plan to be more focused on what the reality is, what new policy is, what gains we've made, and where we see our community going. And so I think the big things that I'd like to be thinking about is that as we've come back to this body in the past, after the mayor's ad hoc group and at successive levels, we really focused in on a couple things. One is we want to have a realistic approach. Gesundheit. We want to have a realistic approach about what our community's doing. We want to be able to build widespread community involvement, and that includes from the kind of public, but also a lot of the different agencies and institutions and actors within our community. And I also just want to make sure that we get clear that on our adopted climate recovery ordinance, the CRO, we've got two main goals at the community level: a 50% reduction of fossil fuels from our 2010 levels by the year 2030. And we also have a reduction of greenhouse gases across the community at a level of 7.6% per year. And so they're two different goals, and they've got two different data points and information that goes on into, and actions that go on into developing those. And we'll kind of walk through those just a little bit today. So again, here's where the majority of our buckets are in regards to where our greenhouse gases are coming from and across the community. And the levels of the buckets are indicative of the percentages. And so roughly about 60% of greenhouse gas emissions from our community come from consumption of goods and materials. Buildings equate to about 15% of our greenhouse gas emissions in the community, and then transportation is around 25%. I wanted to put this one forward. This was from 2000, maybe 15, 16. It was aligned with the update of the climate recovery ordinance in 2016. And even at that time, around buildings and the use of natural gas, there was a discussion in the strategy of reducing use and also shifting into electricity, and then shifting from our electricity to be more renewable. And so that continues to be our strategies and the work that we're doing across a lot of different sectors within the community and the organization. Here's some new data. And this is, as we had talked about, from the last time that we were here, Chelsea Clinton was at the table, and I apologize, Chelsea generally will be engaging you around the climate recovery ordinance and CAP. She's hosting 2 public meetings today, and so she's getting lunch right now between 2 meetings. Is that we just had some analysis done around what our large lever shareholders, our community actors, will be being able to complete within the planning time frame, which is up to 2030. And as you can see around the fossil fuel goal is that we've got about 9 million BTU, MMBTU, and that's gallons of fuel and therms of natural gas that then get translated on into a common metric. And so as a BAU, as a business as usual increase based upon population growth and use, we see an increase in blue. And then over the course of the planning horizon, that gets us on up to about 10 million BTU is what we would be emitting or utilizing, excuse me, on an annual basis. Under the CAP 2.0, all of the reductions that have been brought forward by partners, we see roughly that orange sector there to be our reduction. And that's about a 35% reduction. As we've said, 30, we've just updated. So 30% reduction to get to our goal. So instead of seeing a 50% reduction in fossil fuel use, what we would have just if we implemented the plans that have been adopted and investments that our community partners are moving forward with, we would get about 30% of the way. And so that leaves about 20% or roughly 2 million BTU between the forecast and the CRO, and that's over on that right sector there. And what that would equate to, and council has asked us to kind of put it more into actionable terms, what that would equate to is that if we electrified an additional 20,000 cars, or electrify 40,000 homes, or if we planted 530,000 trees annually and we maintain those trees. And so there's that information there. I wanted to add one more thing. Within the CAP 2.0 reductions, those estimates are based upon 100% implementation of our adopted plans, including, and one of the big lion's share here is our transportation system plan, TSP. And so when we talk about how important the TSP is to implement towards the CRO, that's what gets us to that 30% if we implement it 100%. So once again, a little bit more data, and I hope not to spend too much time on this, but here's our actual use in our forecast for fossil fuel use types. You can see gasoline, diesel, those are in the transportation sector, and those roughly come out to be about, and I'll give percentages in the next slide, around 75, 77%. Natural gas is about 18%, and then electricity, fuel, propane, and because we moved off of steam, we had a huge reduction there. And so here's then those percentages from 2010, 2017, and you can see that gasoline, diesel, and transportation sector in regards to our fossil fuel equates to about 75%, and about 18% is from natural gas within the community. And that could be a mix. Mostly it's going to be buildings, commercial and residential, and there might be a small use within the transportation sector. This is just wanted to shift and be able to engage around kind of filling that gap. As we've heard from council come back to us and help us, and so we're in that process, filling the gap. And so what we looked at is reduce fossil fuel use by 2030 from 2010 levels, so the CRO goals over on the left-hand side of the column. The analysis result that we've just been completed, reduced forecast by 30% by 2030. And so we look at, one way that we can accomplish that is by accelerating within the next 12 years, replacing 20,000 vehicles, gasoline-powered vehicles, in addition to what's been identified within the TSP. Reducing GHG emissions by 7.6% annually. And so once again, if we go back to that concept of the buckets, consumption is a large part of that. And so while fossil fuels relate to transportation and a bit about buildings, consumption is as large as the 60% in the lion's share. And so we have to really think about what do we do there. So then to hit that, what we've forecasted is that we would see a slight net increase, less than 5% in emissions from 2010 to 2030, based upon all of the actions that we would be taking. And so even though we'll see a reduction in fossil fuel use, consumption and then other use of fuels and energy within buildings continue to see our emissions increase by the end of the planning horizon. And so a couple of things that we can be looking at, and we'll continue to come back with more details to council as we get further into the work. So looking at the impacts of the statewide cap and trade law that is will be put forward to the legislature this year, and will be supporting. Increase in federal fuel efficiency standards for automobiles under the current administration. CAFE, which is the federal standards, have been actually reduced, and so there's that has an impact on the amount of fuel that's used system-wide. In terms of consumption, a widespread switch to plant-based diet. So meat consumption, specifically beef, has a very high carbon GHG impact, and so this is something that we as a community can be working on and switching to plant-based and to see that consumption emissions go down. We would also see drastic reduction in fossil fuel use, natural gas, buildings, industry, air travel, deep and accelerated electrification of transportation sector, some of the things that we've been talking about. Drastic reduction in use of high carbon goods such as concrete, asphalt, and steel in construction and development. So that's when we talk about consumption. Those are some big buckets within the consumption sector. We also would see a widespread increase in renewable energy production, solar farms, wind, hydro resources, electrification of building and energy systems, and then also increased investments in low-carbon transit, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and corresponding transit-oriented development. So those are all things that we can be doing. Some of those have direct authority and link to what the city council can be working on. Other things are outside of direct authority of the council and more in the purview of the state legislature, federal government. So just to put that out there. So next steps, a couple things. One is what we'll be working on, a CRO strategy memo. that outlines potential pathways to meet our internal CRO goals by 2020, which are different than the community-wide ones and which are associated with the Northwest Natural Franchise. This memo will be based on previous analysis. It was presented to City Council on the 11th, about a year ago, actually, and completed in early 2018. And so if Council, if you think back when we had Chief Zaludik, Jeff Perry, and Richard Perry, so we had fire, fleet, and facilities up, and we presented some of the work that we had done on the internal climate path, and actually facilities had given forth, here's what it would take to get us to be carbon neutral at that time. And so we presented that material, and we have it. We continue to work on it on an incremental as the opportunities arise basis, but we'll come back to say, if we really want to meet the 2020, here's the pathway to do so. We'll also be working on a CRO gap strategy that outlines potential policy and programmatic options for closing the gap between what the LLS planned actions are and investments and the CRO goals. Strategy will explore potential regulatory, incentive, fee-based, and public investment actions that could reduce Eugene's GHG emissions. Fossil fuel by 2030, work scheduled to be completed by January 2019. So we'll be coming back to you with a little bit more detail from that table that I just shared, but it still won't be down to really, really hardcore analysis because that takes time and we want to make sure we got the right numbers and the right things. But we'll at least come back and say, out of a suite of different regulatory, incentive, and policy-related actions, here's the different things that could make a difference, as had been requested by Council previously. And then just from the standpoint of public involvement, both for the work that Twyla's outlining in the franchise agreement and our cap, this last 2 weeks we've held about 7 public meetings out of the sustainability group. You heard a little bit about that from in the comments last night. And we continue to do that work, and we will continue to really strive to make sure that we get on out and get a lot of voices in the community to be providing input. And our next round will be in the late winter, where we will intend to take to community and kind of a much more engaged effort, kind of like the Red Bus and recreations work that has been really successful in the community. We'll be doing something similar, and we plan to get on out and be engaging around, here's what the planned actions are, and here's where some of the items of filling the gap, and please give us your input. And so what we want to make sure of is the council knows that if you want to give us specific items, things of concern that you want us to add to that, we would love to hear that today to make sure that we're understanding what council's interested in putting into public input and making sure that we're incorporating that and being able to run that through a process that's timely and can then inform both the cap and the franchise agreement. And I think that was it. Yep.
Okay, we're ready. So I have Councilor Clark, Mike, Betty, Claire. Anybody else? Okay, take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that report. I appreciate it very much. Let's see where to start. At last night's meeting, I mentioned a question, and I heard something that I didn't know in what you were just mentioning here, at least for sure, that there are no other communities who are attaching or creating this nexus with their franchise agreement to these goals and these actions. So I asked last night, and I'm still wondering, what's the role of the PUC in our taking this different kind of path here? What will likely be their response and or their part in this process?
So the answer to that question is wrapped up in the work session that you will be having about some of the specific sustainability questions. But we have started looking and preparing for that. And so I can give you a high-level understanding of the PUC's role and how that would work and the impacts it would have on some of the things you may want to do within a franchise agreement. And they're really, the PUC is given exclusive authority over many things when it comes to regulating utilities. And so some of the questions and the suggestions that are in that sustainability memo would fall within the PUC's exclusive authority. For example, any regulation on the type of service that a utility provides or the manner or the product that's actually provided to the customer falls within PUC's exclusive authority. And what that means is if the council were to execute or negotiate a contract that touched upon that exclusive authority or adopt a regulation, it doesn't mean the council's prohibited from doing so. What it means is that the PUC is, we are obligated to give the PUC notice, and they have 90 days to take a look at it and do some analysis about impacts on customers, reasonableness of what rates will be, and a variety of things that they look at. And they, within those 90 days, can tell us, hey, we actually think it has an impact. And if they object and they provide us those findings within 90 days, nothing can go into effect, no contract can be signed or be in effect, and no regulation can go into effect without the approval of the voters. So once you get into any of possibilities, either in the franchise agreement or just with our home rule regulatory authority when it comes to adopting an ordinance, once you get into an area that is designated as exclusive authority of the PUC, that's the path that
will happen next, right? So a lot of folks have suggested that we not build any future kind of infrastructure that allows any future homes that get built or otherwise to be able to have that utility service. Would that touch on
well, so that
what happened in that case?
That is the area, that is one of the items that was in the Sustainability Commission's list and that we're looking at, because right now that answer appears gray to us. Because, and here is why, even though we have the authority to regulate our right-of-way and to assign fees for our right-of-way and we get to manage our right-of-way, the term service, as that is defined within the statute, is defined very, very, very broadly and inclusively. And we don't know, and there's no cases on this. So if it was a prohibition on any sort of extension or any additional infrastructure, we think it's likely that that the PUC would say, well, that's actually an impact on customer and service, and they may weigh in. We just don't know the answer to that right now. It is one of the items we're looking at.
What's our plan for finding an answer before we take a vote on such a question?
Well, it may very well be is we don't know until it's either negotiated as part of, because that one, and just to be clear, some of the items that we're looking at they're not appropriate for a franchise agreement because, as Twyla described, a franchise agreement is a contract between two parties. And there is, within that contract, you don't regulate a non-party to that contract. So, for example, prohibiting the sale of gas appliances could not be a term of a franchise agreement because the people that you're regulating actually aren't a party to that franchise agreement. So there's really kind of three buckets of these questions and suggestions. But a 100% crystal clear answer of whether that would be within the PUC's exclusive authority, based on the preliminary research we've done, we won't be able to provide you that. We'll be able to provide you a better understanding of what that looks like.
Speaking of I see the manager wanted to.
What I was going to say is part of our intent is to come back in February for you to make some decisions, make some votes on things. I think there's several bites at the apple when it comes to natural gas. One is through a franchise agreement, and part of what we'll try to do in February is try to tease out which of those pieces can be included in a franchise agreement versus can't be. And then there are some things that maybe can't be involved in a franchise agreement, but you can capture them as part of the CAP 2.0, and so that's also a piece of it. And so I think it will be, when we come back in February, trying to articulate which are the most appropriate paths to move forward with reducing the use of natural gas, if that's what you choose as a policy direction at that time. Here's the different buckets that those can fit into, and that our intent on February is to bring as much of that information to you as we can. Then you can make some policy decisions on that.
Awesome, thank you. Speaking of buckets, when it comes to natural gas, you listed 3, transportation, buildings, and I forgot the other one. Consumption, thank you. Which does natural gas fall into? All?
I think it could be all, but for the purposes of the cap, we look at it, the majority of it's going to be in buildings and energy use, for industrial processes.
So in other words, the smallest bucket.
Yes.
Okay. Lastly, I'm looking at this gap analysis here and gap strategies at some things that look expensive. Not that they're good or bad or we should or shouldn't do them. I'm not there yet. I'm just saying they look expensive, especially mandating them. Are we going to have financial analysis on all gap strategy proposals? Financial impact like the state does with any such thing?
We'll be working on order of magnitude. I think that given the timeline and that this is something that's going to come, that's adding on into an existing process, and that we should be able to come back with, like, here's an example of a policy that could be implemented, here's what it would look like, and here's what we believe to be the order of magnitude of both the impact and also the economic cost.
Let me ask that question differently. Before the council's asked to make a policy decision that will have broad public impact, will we have information on what it will cost our constituents?
Yeah, so I would go back to if you're going to include in the franchise agreement, we would want to have those kinds of impacts, if there are impacts at that point. And then the CAP 2.0, you might remember, isn't a February. It's as we move into the spring, into the summers, when you'll make some decisions on where you want to go with the CAP 2.0. And our intent would be at that point to also provide financial impact.
During lunch the other day, the mayor and the manager's council leadership, officers had a lunch and we were talking about resiliency, which I think is a really important thing. Where does that analysis play a part of this? For example, if we had a grid failure, the ability for people in our community to cook is a question of resiliency. And if they don't have natural gas to do it, and then in such a case they wouldn't have electricity to do it, they can't do it. So I suppose, I don't know a better thing to call it than a triple bottom line type analysis, where is resiliency as a part of this discussion?
The way that I would approach it, and the way that I think we'd be putting this into in my mind as I'm kind of structuring this, we're going to come back to you with, like, hey, here's some big picture items. Which ones are you really interested in pursuing? Which ones do you want us to, like, set aside and not engage on for right now? We'll dive deeper on into those. And I think as we dive deeper on into any of these, and also with the CAP work, we would be applying a triple bottom line analysis. And in part of that, I think the equity piece would be around resiliency and the long-term impact on some of the aspects of just kind of providing service through a variety of different hazards, could come up. So that's where we would probably put that on in there.
Thank you.
Betty.
Thank you. Well, we're talking about this. In the meantime, more gas lines are going in all over the city, right? And more people are hooking up to gas. Can we do anything about that? No. And when you come back in February, will you have all the things we could do and possible motions to do those?
Yes, we can.
Good.
Yeah, and I think, and again, I think there's a couple of categories on what you can do. So part of it will be is what you want to pursue via the franchise agreement. And then there's other items that would be doable through the CAP, which, as Ethan mentioned, we'll want some additional input from you on those. And as the CAP process plays itself out through the spring, you'll be making more decisions on some of those items as well.
And can you bring us information about what we could do in an emergency? I was just reading about what we did and what the country did in World War II. You did things you didn't think you could do, and did without things you didn't think you could do without. and because of the war effort. If this is extreme, if we're at a place where we really need to take extreme measures, can you tell us what they are? Or what? I think it's, some scientists say we're already too late to stop climate change. And anything that contributes to it is something we should be concerned about, I think. And my opinion is we shouldn't be concerned about the money so much as saving the country, saving the world, I mean.
So I think with the CAP 2.0, the intent of that is to have a plan that closes the gap, and then you can choose which ones you want to move forward on. Whether or not cost is a factor might be different for others, but you will have a chance to decide which collection of items you want to move forward on to close that gap.
Well, there's some things that price doesn't matter about, like saving lives and saving lungs and things like that, and saving plants and animals. I would like, do we have a list of things, actions that we have taken that people could see?
Yeah, Councilor Taylor, we've presented that to this body a couple times. We can continue to make it available on our website.
I know there's things being done internally, but is there anything affecting the community that we're doing?
Yes, as I said, those items have been presented and shared, and they're not just the City of Eugene's. There are a number of our community partners who are kind of curating that and providing it on out there. I'd say that there's kind of two stages. One is that we're going to be actually looking at where all of our investments are as a community, because I think that we want to recognize that greenhouse gases are being generated across our community, and there's certain areas where the City of Eugene has really no regulatory authority, and so we'll be coming back to say, here's an incentive program that we would need to invest in. And so we'll be both providing, here's where we are given the investments of our own community or from our organization and other community actors, and then here's where gap steps that we could do to fill those and give you the kind of the order of magnitude both of the impact and the financial, and ideally give you some level of political analysis as well.
And we will provide you the list. We'll send the list to you.
Thank you,
or the
but
link
I think people are not seeing that we're doing anything. And I'm wondering, is there anything I can't do at my house, for example, because of what we're doing?
I don't think so. I mean, but
I don't have a gas stove, so I can't turn that off. But so there's nothing that's affecting people's lives in general.
Well, you'd have to clarify the question. I mean, you can't openly burn your leaves in your backyard, for example.
Well, we never could.
Right. So
since I've lived here, we never could.
So,
but okay, but that's not something we changed because of the CRO. It was already true.
It was already in place.
Yes, it was in place before I moved here, and I missed burning leaves, actually. I know it's not a good thing, but it's something I miss doing. Okay, thank you.
Claire.
Thank you. Well, thanks for the presentation, and thanks for linking these two topics together in a highly appropriate way. You know, in response to public testimony last night, I reminded us of the obvious, that we all need to be part of the effort to reduce our emissions, and that includes these entities we have identified as large leverage stakeholders. And we know that the City of Eugene alone cannot combat climate change successfully, but we can be a leader in demonstrating the means and mechanisms that can be employed to reduce carbon emissions. And I believe our CRO has the potential to demonstrate that leadership, but only if we take further steps to meet our goals. So I have a couple of questions. In terms of the buckets and how we think about these things, one of the things that was discussed at public comment last night was the use of single-use styrofoam by restaurants as contributing, to our landfill and other environmental concerns. And I would assume that the majority of restaurants in our community use natural gas in their kitchen, so they're not using it to heat the building, and I'm curious how that is accounted for in those buckets, or if that's been thought of. I mean, it might be a tiny portion of the overall natural gas usage, but I think it should still be considered.
So if I understand the question is that what percentage of natural gas use in our community is being used in the kitchen stoves of restaurants?
I'm not necessarily asking you to provide me with a percentage. I'm just curious if it's been put into one of our buckets, whether it's consumption or building.
It would be in buildings, because it would be what would be read at the meter. And so whether it's in building energy, if it's building heating or cooling, or if it's in direct use for hot water heater or a gas stove, that's what we get is kind of meter reading, and then we utilize that as our data.
Okay, that's helpful to understand how we're collecting and analyzing that data. So, and then a question for the city attorney. Are we required to renew this agreement?
No, we have options. So if we were to have unsuccessful franchise renewal negotiations, we can go another way. If we have unsuccessful franchise renewal and we do nothing else, it will default to the statutory provision has a default of no franchise agreement operating in our right-of-way, 5% of what our current is set at, 5%. There are alternatives also. A recent City of Gresham case discussed that. And if we wanted to do away with the franchise and adopt a like utility privilege tax or something along those lines that would apply to private utilities within our right-of-way, there are options and paths, and then we could adopt the percentage that we would want to charge through that if we wanted to do away with franchises.
But there's not necessarily a scenario here where we would take some action that would stop natural gas delivery to current customers.
No. And that would, I mean, stopping delivery to current customers would very clearly fall within the PUC where they would.
Well, I didn't phrase that exactly right. Not that we would stop it, but that would be the end result. Because, so you're saying there's a default mechanism for if a franchise agreement can't be agreed to, there's a baseline in state law that provides for the continued delivery of the service.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of make sure that was clear. So I would like us, and I did have an opportunity to meet with a member of the Sustainability Commission who shared with me some of the policy suggestions that they've been looking at. And so I would like us to look at any and all requirements that we might legally include in this agreement that have the potential to move us towards our CRO goals. So amongst those suggestions, we could set up a menu of options that Northwest Natural could use to meet a predetermined level of reduction that we are seeking. This could be a combination of reducing or eliminating the incentives they are currently providing to customers to get them to switch, switching to a greater amount of renewable fuels, or purchasing offsets. And this would be in addition to the current plans Northwest Natural has proposed to reduce emissions. And I would like a second round, please.
Okay, Alan.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation so far. I want to make sure I got the PUC authority correct. The PUC has exclusive authority to regulate the types of service that a natural gas utility provides. That's getting at the no new fossil fuel infrastructure. You can't say you can't do that. We don't have the authority to do it. Only PUC can do that.
So what their exclusive authority, and I'll just look to the statute, speaks to the rates, charges, or tolls to be paid or that may be collected by any public utility. So if we were to say you have to charge any of your customers X, that would be actually within the exclusive authority of PUC, and they would have a right to notice and involvement. And then it also says any public or the quality and character of each kind of product or service to be furnished or rendered by any public utility.
Character or quality?
Mm-hmm. Quality and character of each kind of product or service. And some of those terms, and service is defined as, it is used in the broadest and most inclusive sense and includes equipment and facilities. So those are some of the things we're grappling with to give you some specific direction around some of the proposals, because we think that a lot of the components that would touch upon the end user probably falls within this exclusive authority. Now, again, it doesn't prohibit us from doing it, but it triggers all those other events.
And so if we did act, then the PUC had 90 days to react, and then if we disagreed, then it goes to the voters?
It's not if we disagree. If we actually
disagreed with the PUC.
So if the PUC says, actually, we think this has an impact on the service provision, the fairness of rates, competition, then they would let us know that they reached that finding within 90 days, and then the statute provides that nothing goes into effect, no contract is good until the voters ratify it.
Voters of Eugene.
Yes, voters of Eugene. So it's not that we're in a position, it's not our choice.
So the franchise fee, 5%, that's a specific statute, actually, that allows us to do that, which is different than PUC authority?
So what, the statute is actually a gap fill. We have authority under statute to try to negotiate any franchise fee that we want with Northwest Natural. What we could, it's a contract negotiation. That's what makes it a contract. So we could try to negotiate something different than 5. I think what Twyla said was the range that we have seen in franchise agreements are around 3 to 5 throughout Oregon. But if we wanted to negotiate a 6 or 7 or whatever, there's no cap. What the statute provides is if you have a utility that's within your right-of-way, you've been unable to negotiate the franchise agreement, or you're still working towards that, the stopgap, the filler there is the 5%. So that's where it just defaults to that. But it's not a cap, and it's not a restriction if you wanted to go use your regulatory authority and get out of the franchise business and regulate your right-of-way in a different way.
So
I'm sorry. Yeah. The 5% isn't a restriction. It doesn't prevent you from getting rid of franchise, just using that whole approach and going a different way. It's how we do it. That's how we've got franchise agreements with other utilities, and so it would be a C shift in how you would be a policy decision and a C shift of approach. It's just the 5% isn't a cap or a limit.
So does the character and quality of PUC authority on the fee, does that follow down to the franchise fee? And what I'm asking that is intrigued by the idea that Matt McCray and Josh Scove put forward, which is to use the franchise fee as an incentive to lower the carbon intensity of the Northwest Natural's gas supply by increasing renewable natural gas in it. And I know that Northwest Natural is actually working on the authority to actually do a renewable portfolio standard, which is electricity, which is the percentage of the electricity mix that needs to be renewables has to keep going up until you meet a certain goal. Trying to replicate that in natural gas with renewable natural gas and be able to do that over time. So the percentage of renewable natural gas that would reduce the carbon intensity and therefore the greenhouse gas emissions would go down over time. I know they're working on that. So would it be under our purview to implement what McCray and Scove were talking about, which is to modify and then give them an incentive that said, if you meet these goals, then we'll lower your franchise fee?
Maybe. And here's why. So, yeah, I saw that come in around 8:15 last night when we were all hanging out together. And we just haven't had a chance to really look at it. Because you hit on the kind of the two questions. Is it simply a negotiation over the fee, which is it's X fee for a flat 2%, and then it varies based on, if you can do a renewable natural. Or are we trying to regulate the product they're providing to their customers, which then you're falling into the PUC? And that's the question that we just need to get our best answer to you for, but we don't have it today.
Right. The follow-ups to that are, one, could we institute an RPS for renewable natural gas in the supply that we get at the city gate from Northwest Natural? That's one. I know you don't have the answer to that, but that's one I'd like to investigate it. And then secondarily, if we couldn't do it if we don't have the authority to do it, because that's PUC purview, could we enter into a voluntary agreement with Northwest Natural to do that over time? That would be a bilateral agreement between the City of Eugene and Northwest Natural to meet voluntarily a RPS type renewable natural gas increases over time, would be the second question.
Can I just jump in real quickly? I think that just from the thing that Josh and Matt sent on out, and as John had said, and I want to kind of add that, is that they're talking about the fee itself as a price signal to Northwest Natural and gas customers. And so I think the issue that we're trying to make sure of is that there's things that are germane to a franchise agreement, and there's things that we can be bringing back to say, if the policy questions around this regulation and or pricing, there's other options. And so just wanted to make sure that we continue to keep that in terms of what we're hoping to be able to come away with from this meeting.
Fully realizing this is a new area and that we're breaking ground here, so it's pushing the envelope in terms of what we'd be able to do within a franchise fee agreement. I don't necessarily feel completely bound by past precedents about what has happened within a franchise fee agreement. If we have the authority to expand it, that's something I'd like to go into a little bit more. I need another round, but one question more, which is, do we have authority over the incentives that they offer, or is that part of the PUC's?
That one I'm fairly confident would fall under the PUC's exclusive authority.
I need a round two.
Yes, I got you for a second round. Anyone else who hasn't had a first round? Yeah, Jennifer.
Yeah, so I want to make sure I understand this right. So there's a base level that it goes, if we have an unsuccessful negotiation, there's this base 5% fee that it automatically hits. Is that accurate?
Well,
Right, so
Right.
whatever we had before, it reverts to this 5%, which is what we're currently doing, so it just happens to be the same.
correct.
So if the negotiation is unsuccessful, what is the downside for Northwest Natural? I mean, they end up with the same situation as they have now, correct?
Well, we aren't, and no, in the sense that we still have authority over our right-of-way, and we can choose to go a different route. We're not, the 221-450, which is the statutory provision that talks about that 5% if there's no franchise fee, we're not bound by that. We could take a different approach then. We could say, fine, we can't negotiate a franchise fee. We can't negotiate a franchise that's we're not going to do franchises for private utilities within our right-of-way anymore. We're going to adopt a privilege tax, and it's going to be X amount. So we're not forced to live with 5% because that is, kind of the gap fill that.
And you said other people have done the privilege tax before.
So there's a recent case, a Gresham case, where that's what they did. They did a 7%, and it was challenged by Northwest Natural Gas, and the assistant city attorney in my office is here that can speak better to that. But at the end of the day, the holding of the court was, no, they can do 7% because they're not under that 5% statutory provision. They put in a whole new regulatory structure. It's not a franchise agreement. It's a privilege tax. They have home rule authority to adopt that. So Gresham did away with their whole structure and went a new way.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I have 2 second rounds. Claire and then Ellen.
Thank you. Catherine, for some reason, your microphone is teetering on the table and making noise.
Sorry.
I'm not sure why. So I have not had a chance to review the input from Josh Gove and Matt, so I look forward to reading that. I'm glad Alan's brought it into the conversation. I think separately from the consideration of the franchise agreement itself, we could also, as a council, decide to devote the revenue from the franchise fee, or if we increase the franchise fee, the excess revenue that would be realized from that, towards the efforts to reduce our emissions. So that could be a separate policy action we can take that would not have direct implications except for the potentially raising the franchise fee on that contract. And, you know, one idea that was, again, offered by the Sustainability Commission would be for us to assist EWEB in providing incentives for people to switch to electric away from natural gas. My understanding is, you know, EWEB does not have a lot of resources in order to provide robust incentives. Again, we got public comment to that effect last night. I haven't checked with them specifically, but and the other reason to think about EWEB is they are chartered by the city. We have a government relationship with them that might make that suitable. So, and I'm sure we could come up with a whole list of other things we might devote that revenue to besides that idea. So I'm just throwing that out there for consideration.
Right. Alan?
Following up on something that Jennifer said, so the privilege tax idea, if we were to institute, say, a 7% privilege tax and say, we will give you incentives if you meet this RPS idea to increase the renewable natural gas and decrease the carbon intensity of your gas supply, if you were to do that, then we'd knock you back down to 5% where you are today. So you'd be, in essence, whole, or we'd be in the same circumstance as we are today, as opposed, but if you didn't act to be on that path towards meeting the goals of this renewable natural gas RPS type idea, then it would be more or less like a penalty. That's a yes, no question. No, I'm just kidding. That's another thing to investigate.
So, and I will say, whether, when it comes to PUC's exclusive authority, whether the actions taken through a franchise, contract, separate ordinance, privilege tax, their analysis and authority is the same. So the question regarding whether it is regulating the product they're providing when we incentivize through the amount they have to pay, that question that I would need to give you direction on would be the same regardless of the mechanism in which you are choosing to impose that.
Okay. There's also two levels of CRO activity that are going on and intentionally within the climate recovery ordinance. One is the internal stuff, and the other is the community. And the internal stuff is the things that the city of Eugene has authority over and can do, and that's our internal climate action plan. And we've got measures to reduce that. And then there's the community action plan, which is with the large lever stakeholders, and that has to be a cooperative agreement. We don't have the authority or the command and control kind of mechanisms to say, EWEB, University of Oregon, Peace Health, you guys have to do this. That's not within our purview. So the ability to act is really different in those two circumstances. And as far as I know, nobody's really done a really good comprehensive community-wide action plan that involved everybody in the community to get to something like what we're talking about, which is the 7.6% reduction or the 50% reduction in fossil fuels by 2030. So it's a completely different type of problem that is a world-class hard problem to solve, and I think we're doing some really good work trying to get there, but it's not something that we can tell those people what to do. And we could, but they could just say thanks. and so at the organizational level, they may have done this individually, but not on a community level. So having it be an aggregate plan is something new. At the local level, on our ICAP, the fact that nobody knows what our greenhouse gas reduction actions have been, the successes that we have had, is evidenced by the fact that people keep asking the question, and folks from 350 and Councilor Taylor just did again, means that we've not been very successful in getting this information out. We need to rethink that because it hasn't worked. So we have to rethink how we do that, what we do, and how we're going to do it. You know, maybe it's something simple like, you know, a United Way thermometer that says we're supposed to be here and now we're here on our ICAP so people can see it and visualize it in a list. So going 17 levels down into the web page to find out what the actions are doesn't work for most people. So we need to rethink how we communicate that in a different way so that it works. Because we have done a lot of stuff, and some of it's really groundbreaking.
I'm going to wrap this up because we have another meeting, but I just wanted to follow up on Alan's comments, which was, you know, to recall Paul Hawkins' visit to us and the drawdown and the message of drawdown, which is a lot of the work we need to do around climate change is work we need to do otherwise anyway. That's good work for us, and I think that's the connection with our partners is as we are clearer about how we're doing this and what we're doing, those conversations with those large lever stakeholders become two-way conversations about, boy, we're really actually benefiting from this endeavor, and your agency or institution will benefit too, right? I mean, that's the value. So I think totally concur. We need a list. We need to be really clear in our minds about what it is we're doing and why it's successful and what our message is to the public, particularly for us as council speaking to the public all the time. We need that quick cheat sheet. This is what we're doing, and this is why it's a good thing. So thank you very much. I really appreciate connecting the two, the franchise agreement and the cap. It was very helpful to us. Appreciate it. Okay, so we are now ready to make the transition to a downtown update. And I apologize for keeping you waiting a little bit. And
You've all got your matching t-shirts.
Matching t-shirts. All right.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm here today with Eric Brown from Planning and Development, Colette Ramirez from Cultural Services, and Sergeant Julie Smith, members of our Downtown Ops team, to provide you with an update on our downtown initiatives for the 2018 season. We've sent you several short communications ahead of the work session to provide you with more details and data related to our objectives, since our presentation today will be pretty brief. If we don't have enough time, we're more than happy to answer questions after the meeting as well. Our team will tell you more about new initiatives this season, lessons learned, and areas where improvements still need to be made. As you recall, our approach has been to use lighter, quicker, and cheaper strategies that can be easily implemented and quickly let go if they aren't providing enough value or benefit. For this season, we focused on what worked well from last year, such as programming and events, increased police presence, the attended restroom, and of course the ambassador program. We also experienced more challenges this year and as issues developed and evolved throughout the season. We're going to tell you more about how successful our initiatives were, feedback we received through surveys and monitoring, what our plan is going forward, including this winter season, and what the takeaways were for our team. The information presented today is intended to help inform your decision on the Downtown Ops team supplemental budget request coming in December. I'll now hand it over to Eric.
So thanks, Jeff. My name is Eric Brown. I work in the planning division. I'm happy to be a part of this downtown team. It's been a lot of fun. We today are going to provide you with a bit of an overview of the framework that we use for coordinating and organizing all of the activities that we do downtown, all of our interventions to make downtown a safe, vibrant, and welcoming place. We are going to talk about some of the initiatives that we did this summer, building on the successes from 2017 and addressing some of the gaps that we noticed. And then I'll provide a bit of an overview of what we've heard about our downtown programming, some of the monitoring and evaluation results that we have, before we talk about where we go from here with increasing our presence downtown and providing a consistent year-round presence. And finally, we'll open it up to questions and discussion. So this is more of a reminder than anything. The ultimate outcome that we organize all of our activities and programming under and in support of is to make downtown Eugene's public spaces safe, welcoming, and vibrant, supporting civic, commercial, and social activities in the downtown core. And I'll try to avoid using the metaphor of buckets, but we have 4 buckets. We have 4 specific objectives. Safety and social services is one of our focuses. So we want to make sure that comfort, safety, and social services are a priority in downtown. We also have a specific objective around events and programming. So we want to activate public spaces to attract a critical mass of residents, especially families and children. We also do work on physical improvements to improve safety, reduce crime, support positive activation, improve visibility and access, and enhance comfort. So we are, the deck, some of the improvements in the park block, in park blocks and in Kesey Square support that positive activation. And finally, we know that we're dealing with trying to communicate our success and communicate around the activities that we're doing downtown to improve perceptions of downtown and foster civic pride around the heart of our community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sergeant Smith.
Hello. So what I'm going to start off is talk about the day storage, and this was part of our lighter, quicker, cheaper ways of going forward to getting the day use center. As you can see in the picture, the day use center is at full capacity and has been since it opened. We served 572 people with the day use center just during the summertime from July to the end of September. It was, like I said, in full capacity. We've received a lot of positive feedback from the community about offering this service. And the clients who utilize this service are very appreciative that they don't have to carry all their personal belongings with them as they access the social services. Again, we started this as a pilot project, but because of all the positive results, we can continue. We will continue to have it open even while the city continues to work through maybe a longer-term solution. Attended restrooms. We continue to work through the complexities of adding a safe restroom services downtown. The attended bathroom model was successful in the park blocks as we had no documented criminal incidents with that attended restroom. We added a second attended bathroom in the Overpark structure, and we are continuing to explore more options for increasing these types of services downtown, especially with our focus of trying to bring more people downtown. Of course, this summer, our objective was to layer the security to introduce and create the right recipe for safety. The concept was to have visible presence around every corner of the core of downtown. 5 downtown ambassadors worked together with downtown DEI and ASI security officers. The ambassadors will remain in service throughout the winter to maintain the constant. We introduced radios to all the officers and DEI and ASI and LTD, and this was used to coordinate the safety and assist in a unified approach, so everyone was operating off the same objectives. A second sergeant was repurposed during the summer from the school's resource unit, and as well as officers from the school resource units and traffic enforcement units to augment and increase the police presence downtown. Additionally, we also added additional extra overtime shifts for officers to work additional hours during the late hours so that we remained safe even during the evening hours when people were out trying to have dinner. And a full-time officer was added to the patrol of the parks this year, so we didn't pull out like we had in the 2017 season. We remained constant, and this actually provided the continual presence needed and actually reduced the number of public calls in the parks. And just for clarification, the Parks Levy helped fund 2 of those park ambassadors that they work collaboratively with and the EPD officers in the parks. The Youth Mentorship Program. In 2017, we really focused on bringing children and families downtown. Although we were successful in those efforts, we really overlooked the demographics, which included the 12 to 21 years of age. And as a result, we experienced a lot of unruly and disorderly behavior near our transportation center. So one of the programs this summer was focused on these at-risk youth. And this was the youth mentorship program. The goal of this program was to build a positive relationship with adults and create a sense of pride in our young people. 5 youth were hired as temporary summer employees that actually work for the city. They worked closely with facilities and cultural services to help make downtown beautiful and inviting. You may have observed them actually planting some of the flowers, painting the bike racks, or setting up the equipment for some of the signature events this summer. And they actually participated with EPD officers at the Spencer Challenge course to help build that relationship and trust with them. And I'm pleased to say that we're actually hiring 4 out of the 5 as temporary employees with the city after this program. And I kind of wanted to tell, and how do you measure that? I kind of want to tell a personal story about an observation that I made. One of the kids was actually standing in a group of kids at the corner of 10th and Olive, where I spent a lot of my time this summer, being present. And there was somebody sitting on the nice wooden flower beds that we had there. And before I could actually go over and address the kid, one of the youth mentors that had worked on this summer actually went over to the kid, and I heard her say, "You know, get off the flower bed. I planted those flowers. I watered them all summer. They're looking really nice, and you're ruining everything." And the kid quickly jumped up and apologized. And so that's the true measure of the program, that it was successful, is that they have pride and ownership and are willing to protect, what we're trying to do downtown. So I'm going to hand it over to Colette to talk about all the fun and wonderful events that we had this summer.
Thank you. Before I show you a couple of projects that we did this summer, I want to paint a picture of what we're seeing with attendance figures at our events. So we know that people attract people, and we've been building on this pillar now for the last couple of years with big successes seen through our attendance figures. And our overarching Huge Fun umbrella, which is the platform for all of the free events across city departments, saw a 75% increase from 38,000 to 68,000 attendees for just this fiscal year so far. And we saw this translate in our attendance figures downtown as well, with the doubling of attendance at our public activations, and then a 40% increase at our signature events. So this shows us that people are coming downtown in record numbers at our events. So with that context, I'm only going to speak about a couple projects because I could go on for a while about a lot of this stuff. But we are especially proud of the Visual Arts Festival. This week-long festival celebrated exceptional street art with the 20 by 21 mural project, contemporary art with the Bridge project, and then gallery art with the Return of the Mayor's Art Show, Karen Clark Gallery's Biennial, and then the Salon des Refusés. And the Visual Arts Festival really showcased the greatest local and global talent that we have. And we engaged over 185 artists, and 75 partner organizations were involved. It was a really kind of important moment for the visual arts community as well to try on a different collaborative and exciting model. And we're, as you can see by this photo, everybody was really kind of excited and proud. And we're really looking forward to seeing what the evolution of that will do for our community. Another project that we are very proud of was our Downtown Program Fund. So we take very seriously working with and empowering our partners and building strong partnerships, because we know we can't do this work alone, and we don't do it alone. So we've been discussing for a few years how we incentivize programming and support partners to help us really activate this downtown core. And we know that by activating them and empowering them, it will broaden our audience and extend our reach and have more people take pride in the community. So this year, we feel like we hit the nail on the head with the Downtown Program Fund, and this grant-like program awarded funds for events in the downtown core. And we more than doubled our investment. We had 9 award recipients. We had 34 events and over 12,000 attendees in addition to what we produce and program. We are planning to double this fund for next year and really to have that broader and deeper reach in our community. So I've shared just a couple of our successes. We've shared those, and I'm going to pass it off to Eric now to discuss our monitoring and evaluation efforts.
So as Jeff mentioned earlier, we tried to provide you guys with information leading up to this meeting because we knew we wouldn't have a lot of time. So there was a couple of emails that went out with stats and figures about our downtown initiatives. We continue to use results-based management as a framework for all of our downtown activities. So the ultimate outcome and the specific objectives that I mentioned earlier help us frame all of the activities and ensure that they're coordinated and organized, supporting that ultimate outcome. We did a community survey again this year for the third year in a row to collect information on perceptions about downtown. And we also did a survey with the downtown day storage users. So folks who were leaving their belongings at the pod outside of the library, we conducted a very short survey with them to hear their perceptions of safety downtown and the value of the service. And we got really good feedback on the impact of that service on their lives and their well-being downtown. So that was really nice to hear. We also, as last year, conducted downtown partner interviews. So with these, we speak to business owners, the Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Neighborhood Association, social service providers, to hear from folks who have a daily experience in downtown and are intimately connected to the challenges and successes that we face here. So we try to do this robust monitoring and evaluation work to ensure that our programming is on point and that we're building on our successes and addressing challenges. When we look at the data, there's definitely two stories. So Colette was talking about the record-breaking attendance at some of our downtown programs, downtown events, and that's the chart that's on the left there. So you can see that in 2018, we are blowing the numbers out of the water in terms of people coming downtown. We also had 2,000 people respond to the downtown survey. So folks obviously really care about downtown and they want to tell us how we can make it better. At the same time, we face a perception issue, and we face we hear from the community that they're really concerned about safety and security. And we have to realize that we're doing this work in the context of a regional, if not national, crisis around homelessness and mental health. There's 150,000 homeless people living on the west coast of the United States, and Eugene is seeing some of the challenges associated with that crisis. And so we're doing this work. We're trying to find local solutions to regional and national challenges. And I think we're having successes. The downtown partners that we talk to say that when we have police present on the streets, when we're activating spaces with public events, it makes a really big difference. The interventions that we're doing make a difference, and we need to ramp those up and provide an ongoing presence and a year-round presence to make sure that we can sustain that positive social environment. So I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Smith to talk about some of our plans for the upcoming year.
Okay, so as you know, that the mobile cameras came in October, and we've already deployed them throughout the city, and have seen within the first 12 hours, we already found them successful and obtained footage to a related ongoing investigation. So they're out there, they're working, and they're already assisting. We will continue the Downtown Ambassador Program, maintaining the 5 temporary employees throughout the year. We actually repurposed, as we struggle and try to beef up our staffing with the police department, we repurposed a sergeant position, assigned them to the downtown team. So we will have 2 full-time sergeants covering 7 days a week supervision beginning in January. We also pilot project adding a community service officer during the summer to the downtown team to see if that would help with not only presence, but interaction and engagement with businesses and citizens. And we received a lot of positive feedback from that. So we not only agreed to add a community service officer to the team, we doubled it. So in January, we will have 2 community service officers working on the downtown team, covering 7 days a week. We will continue to support the community court and outreach efforts, and just continue to strengthen the collaboration that we're doing with our partners in the community. We work really closely in those outreach efforts, both through community court and the EPD outreach team, working with shelter care and the FUSE programs, and those programs have really strengthened over the last couple of years. And as we mentioned, we're going to continue to staff the day storage and the attended restrooms. And to also add that, we had the 1 full-time officer in the park year-round, and in January we'll be adding a 2nd one, so there'll be 2 full-time officers working with those park ambassadors. Do I have time to share the story, or you want me to give it back? Okay, I'm going to give this to her, but I wanted to share a story about. So in 2016, I would have never considered bringing my family or my grandchildren down to downtown. But this summer, my grandchildren wanted to spend time with their grandma, with Grandma Julie downtown. So I actually had them a couple of different times come to downtown. We started in the park blocks. They played on the Destination Imagination equipment. They played with the chess game and on the piano. And then we walked through downtown and we enjoyed the murals. We looked at all the murals that were added during the visual arts and some the art that was added downtown. And then we grabbed lunch at one of the local businesses down there and ate at the picnic table. And there was a performer that was singing there, and there was lots of people there in Kesey Square, and we enjoyed it. And we ended off going to the library, and my grandson was playing the piano there, and a unhoused person came up and told us he was actually a piano teacher in his former life, and sat and actually taught my grandson how to play a few notes before we left. So I do have to say that, we do face challenges, but things are getting better. And if, it says something that if I'm willing to bring my family downtown, that what we're doing is working. We just have more work to do.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, I think the story she just shared really highlights the importance of combining our objectives and how they go hand in hand. So just briefly, I want to talk about what we're doing as we move forward. So we know we need to maintain that continued presence, not only with safety, security, and social services, but as well with our programming. And starting at the end of May, which is what we did last year, was too late. So we will begin earlier this winter. Thank you, Councilor Semple and the Budget Committee for supporting our ongoing efforts in year-round. So this winter, we're going to focus on ambient programming. And when I say ambient, I mean programming that kind of pops up. It can be unconsciously or consciously taken in from folks, and that surprise and delight. And so we're working with a couple artist collectives to focus on the play in the rain concept and work with the weather. So you might see wacky performances, rain paint that only comes out when it rains, light, and more. And then we'll continue with our signature events. We're going to be partnering earlier with Lane Arts Council on one of their winter First Fridays, and then doing a new International Dance Day, and then continuing with our Downtown Program Fund. As I mentioned earlier, doubling that fund, and that program period runs April through October. And then this Friday, just a quick plug, is our annual Light Up Downtown event. So I hope you can make it. It's at 5:15 to 6:30. It's a sweet celebration of kind of gratitude and light. So to close out our presentation, we want to thank the many partners who are committed to a safe and more vibrant downtown. We know we can't do it alone, and see our partners working diligently to help us create a stronger social fabric. We know that people care about downtown. We care deeply about downtown and our community as well. We know that people continue to be concerned about safety, security, and the social environment, and we do this work with intention of doing our best amidst these global challenges and national challenges. So to help our team continue the work to maintain a year-round presence, we are hiring a downtown operations manager and are in the process of actually scheduling interviews now. We look forward to bringing on the manager to help steer our team towards a thoughtful, continuous presence, building stronger partnerships, and really hoping to create sustainable solutions. So we remain hopeful, committed to creating a safe and welcoming and vibrant downtown. So thank you for your time, and open it up to questions and discussion.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank you for your incredible work, and I'm very excited about the downtown operations manager coming on board. I think that sounds great. It's been a great season. So I have Mike, then Alan, then Claire. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that report, and certainly thank you for all of your hard work. There isn't any doubt at all that the four of you and all the staff that work with you are working harder than has been the case in a long time, decades, at trying to make downtown better. And I appreciate the fact that the effort is there and you guys work long, hard hours to try and get it done. I will tell you that I appreciate and admire a lot of what you're doing, but I disagree with the general overall approach in tone in a major way. You're doing a lot to talk about the positive things that are occurring. I especially appreciate your grandkids. When my kids were small, I'd never let them come downtown, ever. It is silly. And I would say that, I guess the best way to say this is that our council does, I think, a really good job of representing different points of view in our community. There's a lot of different points of view at this table. And there are an awful lot of different points of view in our community. With our planning and with our actions, we're covering some of them, but not all of them. And I think there's a gap. And that's why I'm taking the time to talk about this. In this, I agree with the four, actually, well, let's say better, the ultimate outcomes, I agree with 3 out of 4. The fourth one where it says safety and social services, that denotes an approach to safety. When you look at this page here that talks about the growing public sentiment that things are getting worse. People like me will never think things are getting better until they hear messages that the law is enforced downtown. I don't know how to get that as clearly across as I have tried to over the years. We're taking a positive spin approach and a serve people approach, and I agree with that. But it seems to me, and based on these results, to an awful lot of people, as if our approach is all carrot and no stick. And I'm not about getting harsh with people. I'm saying it's an unbalanced, ineffective approach, and it leaves people wondering. We've now, over the last several weeks, built several opportunities for the folks who are camped right across the street right now. We've given them all manner of opportunity and service. And yet they said, nope, we're not. We're going to be over here. We're unwilling to look at that and say, gosh, folks, no. That's not okay. And until we are able to incorporate those ideas as well and tell our community people are equal before the law and we enforce it down here, you're going to have people with that perception problem you mentioned. So I would encourage you to give thought to how to address, we enforce the law equally down here. Thank you.
Alan.
Yeah, I heard you guys did this presentation at a recent conference and won the conference.
You heard that.
Yeah. That's actually really cool. It was a national conference in New Orleans?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what does your shirt say? Definitely not boring. Great shirts. Wearing jackets over them doesn't help with messaging.
Try to keep
Julie, you're the only one out of uniform.
Well, I mean, I could undo. Maybe I do have the T-shirt on underneath.
Great. Well, you know, downtown is getting better, and we're not there yet, and we got a lot more to do, but we're headed in the right direction. The dissonance between the record-breaking attendance and the perception issue is not really surprising. Those that perception's been baked for a long time, and it takes a long time to get over that. And maybe several years of this kind of activity and this kind of work will nip away at that and make that number go down. You know, one of the, I think the biggest issue, especially in the downtown and the surrounding areas like the Pearl District and other places, is the homeless folks and hanging out in the median strips and it just makes it uninviting. You know, what kind of things are we doing in that space? We did some stuff in the Whitaker and we've done some other places, but maybe you could give us a little bit of hope. I know that's 150,000 people on the West Coast. I mean, it's a big issue everywhere. In my former job, I used to travel all over the place. It's the same issues in every single town. It's not, everybody thinks it's just a Eugene thing, but it's not. It's everywhere. So, maybe you know.
Do you want to talk about sidewalk management, or do you want him? Do you want to talk?
Yeah. So it sounds like your question is that it's more citywide than just specific to downtown. Am I understanding that? So one of the items, there's one of the issues that you raised is the parking strips and how folks throughout the entire city of Eugene who are responsible under our code to care and manage them and mow them, and we're talking about the grassy ones, the grassy landscaped ones, what they can do then when they have behaviors and activities occurring within them. And that's one of the issues actually that we're going to be coming back with a work session to discuss with you is having a code amendment that could empower those budding property owners that are adjacent to these grassy parking strips and that are under the code responsible for caring for them, giving them some authority to trespass folks with behaviors in front of them. So that's something that will be discussed with you in an upcoming work session.
Yeah, you know, the Ninth Circuit Court, I think there's a lot of misinterpretation of exactly what that does and how it works, but I've talked with you guys about this issue in particular. I think that will help a lot. It'll give people the authority to enforce trespass in the area that they have control over, but for maintenance, but not for trespass. So I think that, and the other thing is, I think the homeless plan that we've got going on really feels different for me. The stuff that we've been working on with was TAC, and with the metrics and moving and getting down to reducing the numbers of homeless people, I think it feels different and is different. The budget for the downtown program fund, how much is that?
This year it was 25,000, and so we're looking at doubling that to 50,000. And then it more than doubled our investment.
And can you go over the duties of the ambassadors?
I actually printed them off, so I can just hand these out. But this is these are the expectations and responsibilities we give them when we right when we hire them and train them, and so they're kind of their operating guidelines. But I'll go over it real quick. Presence, observe and report, address unwanted activities, hospitality and customer service, support downtown activities and events, cleanliness, stakeholder relations, professionalism, and then reporting. And so they report what they see in their activities as well. That's a real high level, so there's more detail related to that. So they aren't strictly security. We do get a lot of questions in relation to how they operate compared to DEI or even the ASI security. And one of the things we realized last season was we really had a lot of need to set up events and help with Colette's team and do a variety of things. And so it's sort of a hybrid approach where there's this monitoring and observe and report and address kind of the lower level, you know, if they see someone smoking in a non-smoking area or something like that, addressing those type of issues, but not engaging quite as, you know, like a security guard would. But at the same time, there's a real customer service oriented approach to it. So where they're asking folks if they have questions, want to know where an event is, maybe parking related things, or even just helping set up, like I mentioned, for an event or a program or something like that. And I will say, the program continues to evolve. It started with one person, and then we added 4 more. We're going through a hiring process actually to hire 5 as limited duration on 2-year assignments is what they would be. So we'll have a consistent approach, and presumably the same staff that will be in those roles ongoing. And so as they learn that job, they really kind of pick it up and understand it. And we saw that with the park host. He was there for about a year, and he was just outstanding. And he left. He had to go back home. But he was a great employee, and but just that experience alone really provided a lot of benefit that he was able to train the team on. So
great, and excited about the downtown operations manager. What's their duties going to be?
Well, they will manage the team, and so I've been in that role sort of for the last couple of years.
All the other stuff.
Yeah, with all the other things. And so I would say, it kind of has ranged from part-time to almost full-time when things are really moving along in the beginning, in spring and summer, and then it kind of, it backs off and I start re-engaging my other duties. And so I'm really excited that we'll have somebody full-time dedicated to that position because some of the gaps, we wanted to do more outreach and really engage folks, and we just simply didn't have enough time to do all the things on our list. And so having a person in that position is going to be really helpful. And so they will supervise the downtown ambassadors. They'll help establish the budget each year, help lay out all the different initiatives, work with the team on what we're going to do, and they'll be at this table, no doubt, going forward. So,
you want me to move to extend the meeting?
Yes, please.
Move to extend the meeting for 7 more minutes.
Second.
All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 1. Okay, we'll extend. Thank you. Claire.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for this great update. I am very proud of the work that you all have been doing, and I hope you are too. You seem to be, rightfully so. So I do have a series of questions, and you may not have the answers to these now, but I think these are some of the things you're trying to get at least in some respects. So in terms of the day storage, did we see a reduction of people piling their belongings on the sidewalks throughout downtown and on the right-of-way with the opening of the day storage?
I think we saw some. I think that there is the stigma with that population that they are very, they're not trusting and they are victimized repeatedly. And so they oftentimes, when I see somebody with all their belongings next to them, I offer them the service, explain it to them, and they are still worried that even though they drop their stuff off there, they'll think that somebody's going to steal it. So, I'm hoping that, in reality, we only opened it in July, and here we are only in November. So it really hasn't been open that long, but in reality, serving 572 people towards the end of September, that's a lot of use. And it's typically at full capacity, meaning that they do have to turn away some clients that come to drop off their stuff because they just, the pods, we don't have quite enough room. And so I probably expanding or coming up with a longer-term solution would be a good idea.
And could we see the survey and the results that were, of the survey that was taken of people who used that day storage?
Absolutely.
Thank you. What is the cost for the attended restroom? I'd like to get that if you don't know it today.
It's probably, for the season, I want to say it was around, $50,000 probably. What we did one of our strategies was to try and kind of get, we had talked about this in the past, but kind of get two FERS and 3 FERS and things like that. And so what we did with the attended restroom at the Overpark was we hired security to manage that. And so they were there monitoring that, but they were also doing a little bit of patrol on that level. And so you kind of, there's a cost for the attended restroom, but it really needs to be acknowledged that there's also a security element, which actually helped dramatically with security issues at the Overpark, as we heard. So.
How much was that?
How much was it? I think I can't follow up, but I think it was around $50,000, give or take. We started it a little late, but that's for about a 6-month period of time. I think that's what we were looking at. Maybe it was. I'll follow up with you.
And then the follow-up question to that is: do we believe having that restroom available led to fewer incidents of people using the alley or other unsuitable locations to relieve themselves downtown. That was part of the point of opening the restroom. So I'd like to know if there was a corollary in a cleaner downtown, healthier downtown. And which parks were the full-time police officer assigned to?
I think they were assigned to patrol all the parks. So, I mean.
Can you name specific parks for me?
Well, I don't supervise the park specific.
They weren't assigned to all the parks in Eugene.
They primarily worked Washington and Jefferson Street Park, but all the parks along the river and adjacent to.
Okay, so not just Kesey Plaza and the park blocks, but further out.
Right, yeah, no, the park officers, the officers that are assigned to the parks are actually assigned to the parks and not part of my downtown team. They actually patrol the parks and work in collaboration with the park ambassadors.
Great, thanks for that distinction. In the survey, community survey, were the people who responded to the survey asked if they've been to downtown in recent months? I know we've brought this up before. And did we exclude responses from those who haven't actually come downtown from their perception? Or do we include everybody who had an opinion about downtown, whether they've actually been down there or not?
So the data that was shown tonight or today included all respondents, whether they'd been downtown on a daily basis, lived downtown, or had almost never been downtown.
So we could be getting perceptions from people who've actually not visited downtown but are just operating off of their prior opinion or what they hear from other people.
Yeah, but we can parse the data and pull out opinions of those people who are only downtown infrequently or downtown on a day.
Yeah, and I think for this council's purposes, I mean, both are important, but I think knowing what the actual experience of people who frequent downtown over the past several years and what their perception is of whether things are improving or not improving is actually more helpful in terms of understanding if what we're doing is having an actual impact on those people's experience as they are actually in downtown. And I would like to offer that the temporary employees be made permanent employees if they're going to be employed year-round. That doesn't sound like a temporary assignment. I understand they may have been funded with one-time dollars, so that could be a challenge, but I just would like to say we shouldn't be hiring ongoing employees as temporary employees. And lastly, I want to say I don't agree with Councilor Clark's critique. He's left the table, I'm not sure why. We have added police presence and guardian trailers downtown, and those aren't there to hand out candy to people. They are there to enforce the law within constitutional limits as we are required to do. Our community court program is to hold people accountable for their behavior without continuing the cycle of ticketing people who can't pay their fines, but there is accountability measures in those enforcement mechanisms. So while there is more to be done and more improvements to be made, I see that both using carrots and sticks in these efforts is really what's needed to keep moving us forward in this positive direction. And congratulations for almost doubling your participation in the huge fun events.
Okay, I have 4 counselors who still wish to speak, and we're going to need to extend again, if you can withstand it. So.
Someplace I needed to be 10 minutes.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, well, so speak quickly then.
I will
Okay,
contact
Jennifer?
them on my own time.
Okay, Chris?
pass.
Okay. Emily?
I'll say it really quickly. There's only 2 parties at night. One was added because of the protest, and that's not enough to keep feces and urine out of downtown. I'm sorry it costs that much for an attended restroom, but 1 potty after 5 o'clock at night is not sufficient for the downtown area. There's not time, but I'm curious as to which laws you want enforced downtown, Mike, that we can actually enforce. And then, of course, to me, it's great to get more people downtown, but there's still a big urge to get people out of downtown with nowhere else for them to go. So I'm extremely anxious to hear what's going on with the Downtown Day Center. The City Hall lot was supposed to open this week. So I'm behind already. I appreciate your efforts and the reports, and I still have a big gap downtown. Thank you.
Betty?
Quickly, I think we need places to sit. I've been saying that forever. And people have told me one place I sent an email saying that a man said he took his mother from a assisted living home downtown, and she was enjoying it, then she got tired, wanted to sit down, there's no place. And I agree with Emily, we need more restrooms, and the restrooms in this building should be open, and whenever this building is open, they're not open, they're only open during a meeting. But those are things that were needed, and I wondered if anything is happening, if anyone is consulting or conferring with Ali Imami about opening the walls on Kesey Square. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry to rush you at the very end. We really appreciate work and great report. Thank you. And we are adjourned.